Welcome to Shamperd. I'm Cheshol, and here we discuss all things 3D printing. Today we're having a look at my Workbench, which I use for all of my post-processing tasks. I've had it for a little over a year now, and during that time, it's gone through a series of upgrades. But really, at the end of the day, this thing is just a product of me trying different things because I've never owned a proper workbench before, and I never knew what I wanted in my workbench. I've never even bought anything specifically for this table. It's entirely made from scrap materials from different projects in the past. Anyway, all that to say, not a whole lot of planning went into the current setup. But after using it for a while, I think I'm starting to understand what's not working for me, which means it's time to build the next one. Here's what we're using as the base for the new build. It's a small cart I got from IKEA, and I put a little credit card on top for scale. I also got a piece of cabinet door in the same finish for a completely unrelated product, but I think it'd be a good tabletop for my new workbench. And you might be thinking, that looks awfully small to be someone's workbench. And you'd be right, it's tiny. But the truth is, I only need this much space in my experience. The cart is a little too tall right now, so I'm gonna cut it down to the right height and make a few other modifications. So give me a sec, I'll be right back. A few hours have passed and the general skeleton is all done. There's still a lot of work remaining, but all the dusty parts are behind us. So I think I'm at a place where I can take this inside and finish the rest over the next week or so. Okay, let's head back inside. Right about now is probably a good time to tell you what this video is about, because all the things I've shown so far, they're not necessarily 3D printing related, they're more woodworking / carpentry. What I'm thinking of showing from this point on are tool organization solutions, which are kind of like mini 3D projects on their own. But also, as I hang the tools, I get to talk about what tools I find useful versus not. And that's the part I think will be relevant to some of the viewers. So hopefully you get something out of it. And before we jump into that though, it's really dark in here, so let me put up the lights first. Okay, that looks better. So going back to what I was saying, let me start by giving you some context as to what I print, because it wouldn't make much sense if I randomly start evaluating tools. I make custom shells for game console controllers. For example, here's a PS4 controller that I modified in my last video on the channel. The work involves prying the controller open, taking the PCB out, designing and printing a new shell, and transplanting the PCB to the new shell. I do a fair bit of soldering work in terms of time spent on projects, but the bulk of the work is rewiring on-off switches, so nothing fancy. Another thing I do a lot of is making woodworking jigs like these and shop organization projects. So if you think your 3D printing career falls in one of these two categories, keep on watching. I've been on a major printing spree last couple of days, and I'm here to give you a quick update. First and foremost, I've come up with a mounting solution that does not have any slack that pegboard is infamous for. Let me show you how it works. Okay, here's the breakdown of all the parts. First, you have the adapter piece that is for your specific tool. In this case, this is a syringe holder. So it's got two hooks on the front. And when we flip it over, it's got one peg at the bottom and a missing peg at the top. On a typical pegboard accessories, you would find two pegs, and the one at the top is supposed to be curved like this. And that's the one that's missing in my design. In my design, the curved piece is printed separately and inserted during the installation. First, you align the pin with the hole and put it in. Then, with your other hand, you insert the curved piece. And at this point, the adapter is pretty loose. That's when you take the spacer and eliminate the slack. So now, it's pretty solid. There you go. In this example, The straight peg is glued onto the main piece. And that's because this is a very low profile mount. Here's an example of the alternative design where there's a hole where I can take a peg and just press fit it in there. In the end, they both achieve the same thing, but this does not need to be glued on, which saves time. The spacers can take any shape as long as they're able to provide consistent pressure between the pegboard and the mount piece. One benefit of this system is that the holes have an 82-degree taper countersink profile. So they're compatible with number 2 screws. So if you want to use any of the adapter pieces on, say, a sheet of plywood, you can totally do that. Okay, let's go over some of the design decisions or specific tools that I have. If you use super glue on 3D printed parts, try baking soda solution in a spray bottle. It's a cheap replacement for the accelerator. If you need to connect many wires together for things like shared ground pins, try soldering directly to a strip of copper like this. This works great in tight spaces. I really like this Irwin brand wire stripper, but it's huge. And if I were to mount it like this on the wall, that would be a huge waste of space. So, I've turned the mount by 90 degrees. I bought a few sets of these magnet bars to hang the tools, but the screw holes didn't line up with the pegboard and they're way too long. So I took my angle grinder and cut off the ends and made this little adapter piece to make it work with the pegboard. And this has to be one of my favorite tools to use for 3D printing. It's a pair of locking pliers that look like scissors. It's got teeth and has 3 locking positions. So instead of squeezing and pulling at the same time, you just have to pull, which is a lot easier on your fingers. Okay, switching gears a little, let me talk about a few tools I'm not keeping at the workbench. The first one is a metal scraper. I'm not sure how this ended up here, but I don't think there's a single use case for this tool in my 3D printing setup. One use case that I can think of, and it's a bit of a stretch, is when you have a very stubborn material stuck to your build plate and you want to scrape it off. But even then, it's a pretty risky business. Let me know in the comments if you know of any other use cases. Okay, moving on. The second tool I'm not keeping is this plastic scraper. This is actually a great tool and I use it all the time in my printer room. But I just can't find the use case at the workbench. The third tool is this spinny cutter thing. I actually forget what it's called, but you probably know what it is. It's great for when you have elephant feet or things like that. But I haven't had to use it for a very long time. I want to say the last time I used it was more than a year ago. So I'm still going to keep it in my drawer just in case, but it doesn't get used enough to make above the cut line, unfortunately. So yeah, those are the 3 tools I'm not keeping at my workbench. I'm actually surprised there's only 3 tools. I thought it would be more. Okay, back to the build. Okay, I think the bench is almost done at this point, with a few remaining finishing touches. One is this lamp that I have to set up. I need another light source to be able to work comfortably, so that's one. The second thing is, I want to route wires from the DC converter back behind the pegboard and down to my work area so I don't have messy cables everywhere. And for that, I think I'm gonna rebuild this unit in a different shell so it fits better on the new table. And lastly, we have this mystery hole in the middle. You've been trying to guess what it's for. This is a garbage hole. You know the counters at Subway or McDonald's where you return the tray and they have big garbage holes? I got this idea from that. I'm gonna find a way to mount this jar on the underside so I can keep my workspace clean while I'm working. Okay, time to get to work. I'll give you another update when I'm done. Okay, I'm really close to finishing the cable management work. So I've run all of the wires behind the pegboard and here's an example of the finished box. All of the positive terminals are on one circuit and same thing goes for the ground. So let's go ahead and put the second faceplate on. Looks good to me. Oh, by the way, I'm going to keep this general area relatively unoccupied, just in case I decide to get an oscilloscope and need a third box. Okay, the garbage hole is finally done. But before we take a closer look, let's talk about this first. This is what I'm calling the soldering smoke diverter, which is just another name for a filterless fume extractor. There's zero health benefits to using this thing. The only reason I made it is because I hate the smell of burning flux, and moving the smoke away from my face makes a difference. I'm going to have to invest in a proper air filtration system at one point, but for now, I'm just going to keep the windows open when I solder. Let's go over the highlights of the unit super quick. This is a regular 120mm computer fan, which I have a ton of. And this is a 12-volt Milwaukee low capacity battery. The reason I say low capacity specifically is because the larger capacity models have bigger bases and they probably wouldn't fit here, so it has to be a low capacity one. And on this side, we have the 20mm toggle switch. I didn't realize this until after I finished making this unit, but I should have put a touch sensor instead of a toggle switch because this requires quite a bit of force to operate, and it just slides around the table. If you're curious, here are the power requirements. Okay, we finally get to talk about the garbage hole. This is something I wanted to have for a very long time because I always have little bits of wire sheathing and things like that all over my table, and this would be awesome. Okay, if we take a look at it from below, this is just a scrap piece of melamine that I found in my garage. I screwed the aluminum lid to the melamine, and melamine is held in place by this notch that I cut out, and on the front, just a little steel tab that I put in there. Maybe let me demonstrate how it works. So whenever I have to empty the garbage can, I can go like this, empty it out, come back, and twist it back in there. I hope you got something out of this video, especially if you work on the same kind of projects that I like to work on. Hopefully the video was informative. Thanks everyone for watching, and see you next time. Bye.